here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Palden Jenkins, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Hasn't had a lot to do with indie pop from the 80s, but is a fascinating character and has been very active since the 60s, especially in the world of the counterculture, hippie, new age movement. I have put links to his website in the notes below, so you'll be able to find out more information. It's a fascinating chat. So, yes, sit back, relax, enjoy. So after several minutes of interesting, but yes, just casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Palden, it's over to you.
I was born in 1950, which meant that, and I grew up in Liverpool during my teenage years, which meant that I was kind of involved in the whole thing in Liverpool as a young person, you know, when I was 17 when Sergeant Pepper's came out.
Well, yes, you're right there.
And, you know what happens during your teenage years. You're taking in so much stuff, and Liverpool, perchance, was, of course, a world centre for the kind of cultural revolution that was going on in the 60s. And I was at the back end of that generation, really. You know, people like, say, Mick Jagger are about 10 years older than me. But I was at the back end. If I had been 3 to 4 years younger than I am, I'd have missed it.
Yes, you would have.
I'd have still been stuck in school, you know. But I took acid when I was 16, and in those days it wasn't illegal, and there was a spirit of fascination and of experimentation which was around, especially amongst, you know, in universities and amongst young people. Particularly, I think it was really middle-class people, actually. And so the whole 60s thing was going on, and I was kind of very involved in it. I went to the London School of Economics in the late 60s to university, and that's where I met people like Charlie Barley.
Right.
And of course, it was the kind of the revolution which we attempted there.
Yes.
Which had a major formative effect on me. This was happening, you know, when I was 19, 20, 21, 22. And I found myself playing a part in that, a small part in that. But the thing was that I've always been, well, well, nowadays they call me autistic, but I have Asperger's syndrome.
Right.
And we Aspies, we call it wrong planet syndrome. You know, from the very beginning of my life, I just felt like an outsider.
Yes.
And so when I took acid, sitting on the side of the dock in Liverpool and looking at the petrol, you know, when petrol is on water, it forms these amazing rainbow shapes.
Well, yes.
And I was looking at all that with my friend. And that was my first trip, really. And suddenly something clicked for me. And while at the LSE, I was very attracted by all of the thinking that was going on there. There was a flowering of all sorts of different things, you know, ranging from left-wing stuff, Maoism, Marxism, you know, Herbert Marcuse, people like that. But then there was feminism, there was the new green politics, there was the beginning of the gender politics that's happened ever since. There were all these new ideas coming up, and I was a young hippie, you know, I was on the Pink Floyd side of things. And so, you know, that was where I started.
Yeah, and what were where was your parents' background? Because they would have lived through definitely the Second World War.
Well, yes, they were born in the First World War.
They were born in the First War. So what was their kind of background? Did they...
Well, they were deeply involved in the war in their early 20s. My mother was in the Blitz in East London for 2 years. My father fought in Egypt, lost a leg, got shipped out to South Africa. So he was a little taffy boy from Swansea, and the World War II really changed his life.
My God, that is
And
horrendous.
he came back as an injured soldier, minus half a leg, and got into university without any qualifications. It was the London School of Economics, as it happens. And
Right.
then he got involved in that rather famous plastic surgery hospital in East Grinstead because he was ahead of the game. He came back to Britain as an injured soldier in 1943, so that when all the other soldiers were getting demobbed, he was a year or two ahead of them in terms of dealing with his disability, his injury, And we're talking about 750,000 soldiers here who had lost, lots of people. And so he got involved in all that in the late 40s. But my family was a very dysfunctional family. Eventually, they rose during the 1950s and 60s into the middle classes. And so I was a kind of a dissatisfied young middle-class boy growing up in a grammar school in Liverpool. And I felt no one understood me, and most of the time I spent alone
Yeah.
or working on a nature reserve nearby. And so anyway, that was the start of it all.
But when you got to 13, obviously suddenly we went from skiffle and Lonnie Donegan and there was obviously the little folk clubs and potentially trad jazz to the early Beatles. That's 63, 64. I mean, you would have just been hitting an age of like excitement as well as various other kind of.
Well, I went to the Cavern.
You went to the Cavern, right?
Yeah,
So
it was what's her name? Sorry, I've got memory problems. Cilla Black.
Cilla Black.
She worked in the cloakroom. She used to take your coats for threepence,
Yes.
And, that's where I first sort of saw her, and it was really kind of heaving and developing in Liverpool. I mean, I had to juggle this thing because I realized the only way to get out of Liverpool was to get qualifications and go to university somewhere. And so I was partially stuck in school, but partially there was this stuff going on in the evenings and the weekends,
Yes, absolutely.
And so that was my formative time, and I was going through a big struggle inside, which, well, I don't know. It's such a long story, actually. I don't know, that we could go on for hours. But I landed up being hounded by police and landed up in North Wales, and going into a period of inner exploration, of spiritual exploration, driven mainly by psychedelics. But I was reading all the books, The Secret Doctrine, and about Buddhism, and about, and Alan Watts, and all the stuff that was around at that time. And I Ching, and I was beginning to learn astrology and stuff. And so that was a big change. And one of the things that has characterized my life really has been that I've both been on a spiritual path, but also a political path. And very few people have done that. Actually.
No, because the spiritual often sort of will say, I'm not interested in politics. And so we stick with, ley lines, crystal therapy and various other cosmic things. But, it's them quite divorced. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but at the same time, it's a little bit living in a like wanting to live in a fantasy land, which is okay unless you're part of the real world, and then you kind of mix up. It would make it's a lot easier for people who've got wealth, and then they can cocoon themselves into a little world. But if they're relying on the benefit system while wanting not to be part of politics and not voting, they're going to get a little bit of they get quite bitter and twisted. I've found in my life, but that's another story. Really,
well, yes, perhaps. But this led later on in life. Well, first of all.
So look, just go back to London though. So you were in Liverpool. You did your A levels, and then you did the Summer of Love, which was very exciting, Sergeant Pepper, and obviously 67. You know, San Francisco has the gathering of the tribes in sort of Golden Gate Park in January with people like Ginsberg and Timothy Leary, and then there was the Ali Pali experience with Pink Floyd and Arthur Brown. So things are going well in 67, and you would have been just doing your A levels at this stage, weren't you?
Yes. Yes.
While doing a few psychedelics at the same
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Which is,
and the psychedelics kind of helped me because I came out with glowing A levels.
right.
My headmaster thought I was arrogant to be even thinking about going to university because, you see, he was negatively judging me as an Aspie. He was thinking I was no one in particular, when what was happening was I was bored stiff with school, and so I didn't achieve very much. But I knew, Aspie hyperfocus, I knew that if I got good exam results, then I'd escape. I'd get out of this hellhole.
And what were your subjects that you studied?
Geography, history, and economics mainly.
Right. So you could keep that focus. So you got to the London School of Economics in your first year. And is this when you met Charlie Barley?
Yes, perhaps in my second year, yes.
Right. And he was also doing the same. What was the degree that you would doing or attempting to do?
Well, it was geography, but the thing that started the whole thing in the London School of Economics was that people were feeling stuck in their courses, and often when they came to university, they were discovering a whole load of new things. So they wanted to change courses or do different variations and things, and that was not allowed at the time. But that's what sparked an antipathy between the university authorities and the students. That's what really started it all off, was that whole thing. And that happened for me because I was doing a geography degree, but suddenly I was discovering all these other things, such as social anthropology, and stuff like that, which I'd never known about when I was in school in Liverpool, social psychology, all these kinds of things. And also I was in a struggle inside, finding my way and discovering all sorts of things, like social psychology, for example. I discovered that, I was interested in psychology because I wanted to find out more about the nature of the mind, but what social psychology was all about was about fitting people into the system, making them normal, and efficient and all that kind of thing. And so I was sort of struggling through these things. And it was only by about the age of 22, 23 that I really was making progress on my spiritual development, which was starting to help me resolve things.
Yes. So did you, at that stage, being in London in the late 60s, did you come across things like Barry Miles and Hoppy Hopkins and that Indica bookshop scene that developed and that
Not
kind of...
particularly, no. There was a lot going on,
There was a lot going on during that time. But then you would have been at that age where you're thinking 19, 20, it's all going terribly well. And then suddenly the 60s goes from beautiful, everyone loving each other, to it ends badly, doesn't it? Brian Jones dies. Then 1970, Hendrix, Morrison, Joplin all died.
For me, it was the in the LSE, it was the outbreak of violence, and I was saying, you won't really succeed in a revolution if you're just fighting the pigs. If you want to build a revolution, you've got to build what is going to replace the system that we now disapprove of. Don't fight the system itself. Build the alternative,
Yes.
And that was my philosophy, which was kind of quite parallel to, say, John Lennon's philosophy, but if you're talking about destruction, don't you know that you can count me out, And so that was the way I was going. Later on in life, I've been doing what I vaguely call humanitarian work, mainly in Palestine, but it started in Northern Ireland and it progressed through Bosnia and Kosovo and things, mainly Palestine and also a bit of Syria. And there, that was where the spiritual and the political were coming together, because what I was doing in Palestine was well, all sorts of things, really. But one of the key things was that I was working to help key people, key social activists and peace activists on the rails, because Palestine is a terribly difficult working environment where you make zero progress. That's one thing, if you're going to be involved with Palestine, you have to get used to the idea that everything you do can get wiped out.
Yes.
And that you can make zero progress. And if you have a dream of making peace in the Middle East, forget it. Go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Go somewhere else. It's not, and so I was working with a lot of these activists, mainly with Palestinians, but also with Jewish people as well, because this is not about Palestinians versus Israelis. This is about humans versus the mega machine, really.
Yes.
And that's been my fundamental motivation politically, has been that one. And so anyway, so I've worked a lot and I still do. Now I have a blood cancer. I've been semi-disabled for the last 6 years and hovering on the edge of dying, but I seem to be still alive. And I'm still working remotely now with people in Palestine, both Gaza and the West Bank, with some Tuareg in Mali, in West Africa, and also with 2 people in Ghana. Those are the main ones, really. And so I'm still working with them, sort of trying to, in a way, keep them going, and hold them up and give them gifts of spirit.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But just going back slightly, once you finished or didn't finish your university course, then how did you navigate the 70s period at this point? You were in London. Well,
it's a very long story, but basically I retreated to Wales, went through 2 years of awakening, and then do I want to tell us? Yeah, well, whatever.
Yes. So what happens in Wales?
Well, I went through an awakening, really, and lived quite a lot alone, but 1 or 2 people coming. And there was one stage where one person who came, who was a good friend and a mutual friend with Charlie Barley, actually, who I'd been at university with. And basically, we were foraging, and one day picked the wrong thing, hemlock water dropwort.
Right.
And basically, he died. I was unconscious for 9 days. I woke up with much of my memory scrubbed, and I have never recalled it. I have very little memory of my life before I was 24. And I woke up a different person, and also being chased by the police. That's a long story, which I don't want to go into.
Was that connected with the foraging, or was that a different story?
No, it was going back to the LSE and a thing called the SDS, the Special Demonstration Squad, which was fomenting trouble. And I was being accused of working for the Soviet Communist Party.
Right. Crikey. Yes,
when in fact I was a hippie. I wanted to change the world, yes. But, I was not. Communism was the old stuff. That's the old way, as far as I was concerned. But anyway, I landed up meeting up with some Tibetan lamas, and they took me to Sweden, and I spent 7 years as a political refugee in Sweden.
Right, my God. So you were were you kind of in hiding at that stage?
Sorry?
Were you in hiding? Was it kind of you had to sort of keep a low profile for the rest?
That's why I was in Wales, yes.
Right. So you were just kind of, my God, that was your 20s were rather stressful, yes. Really, wasn't it? You packed a lot in, which was how do you survive that? So then 1980 comes along, it's another political
Yes. While I was in Sweden, I had to renew my passport at one stage, and I thought, oh, God, what's going to happen? Went to the British Embassy in Stockholm, handed in my papers. Mr. Jenkins, will you come this way? And I thought, oh, God. go into the guy's office. He sits me down. He says, "Mr. Jenkins, would you like a glass of sherry?" And I thought, all right, thinking, what's the trick? And he said, "Well, Mr. Jenkins, I have some good news for you. That all the things you were suspected and accused of have been." Your case has been used in the first prosecution of senior police officers in the history of this country, which was 1978, I think it was.
Right.
I don't know. I was unaware of it because I was in Sweden, and you're free to return to Britain. And I kind of fell off the floor, because I'd got into the idea that I would never go back to my home country.
Well, no, absolutely. My God, you were. Yes.
So anyway, eventually I landed up coming back from what was then one of the richest countries in the world with £10 in my pocket and a marriage which had fallen apart and losing 2 children and all that. Came back to Britain, and within 10 days I landed up in Glastonbury.
Right.
Which I'd never heard of before until I landed there, and I suddenly realised, shit, I'm going to be living here. And I landed up living in Glastonbury for 28 years.
Right, through the
and
80s.
So I was a key person in Glastonbury. You could say Glastonbury, there's probably about 40 or 50 key people in Glastonbury who are the real people who kind of, in the end, really hold it together. They kind of, in a sense, are the mainstays of the community and the whole thing there. And I was one of those. And in 1984, in 1983, oh God, this is such a long story. I don't know.
So 83, yes, 83.
Yeah. Well, I with a chap called Jamie George, I started some gatherings in Glastonbury, and one was an Earth Mysteries gathering, and that was dynamite. And soon it became clear that we needed to have people together for a longer period of time without it having to cost a bomb.
Yes.
So eventually, anyway, being an old Boy Scout and everything, I just and also being rather disillusioned with the festivals, which were, they were fun and everything, but people weren't getting together. And there were all sorts of conflicts going on. And there was the peace convoy and the hippie convoy, and there was, all this stuff going on. So I started the camps with an entirely new, different paradigm to them. And these were going to be no electronic music. These were going to be holistic educational. They were going to be for people in a few hundreds. They were going to have designed camping sites that, all sorts of innovations. They were going to have no dogs, which then was a radical thing.
Very radical, yes. No alcohol?
Well, yeah, it was no alcohol, and, except on the last day. That it was permitted on the last day.
Yes.
And stuff like that. And basically it was and people suddenly got it. They suddenly realized, shit, you can go a level higher if you have this sort of structure and if you're designing it as a community. And we had camps on astrology and Earth mysteries and what other things were they? Community stuff. And these camps were earth-shaking. And for the first 3 years, they were just dynamite. That's a whole story in itself. But then I had to. This had all been spontaneous, and people couldn't sustain it. And people were coming to me saying, "Look, we can't carry on like this. This is too big," And people were also, in a way, people had changed so much. It had been such a spiritual boost for people that people were burning out, really.
Yes.
And so I started a new thing, which was the Oak Dragon camps in 1987. And also there were other camps which came out of it, the dance camps, the Rainbow Circle camps, the Unicorn camps, the Buddha Fields Festival, all sorts of things. People saw the model, they saw the weight, the method sort of thing, and it sort of took off. And and anyway, by about the end of the 80s, I was kind of quite burned out, and also there was a kind of a palace revolution in the Oak Dragon, and I got chucked out. The founder got chucked out.
It always happens because interesting enough, I went to the Welsh dance camp, and then from there we started in the East, Dance Camp East.
Yes.
And so we were doing it was 9-10 days. And again, that was from 1992 right through for decades that we did
well,
it.
That was started on a model, which the first dance camp we did was 1985.
Right.
And it was, that model, though people like Chris, what's his name? He was doing circle dance, and there were other people doing dances of universal peace. And
yes, those camps as well. Yes,
Colin Harrison,
right?
And he and various other people, they started the dance camps out of the model of the original Glastonbury camps.
Yeah, because what was revolutionary in a way was that a festival is in 3 days, roughly Friday to the weekend, where the camp would start on a Friday, go through the weekend, the following week, and then so by then what we found was that people had this very intense process. So we would have that first weekend, everyone was very up and excited, and then we would call it Wobbly Wednesday, where people would have this existential crisis, and there was tears, people getting divorced, people falling in love. It was all very emotional, and then hopefully people patched it up, and then by the end they would leave. But they'd been used to this field for sort of 10 days in this community around a circle, around that fire that they became so familiar with, that they just couldn't go back to real life anymore. They just kind of questioned everything, including myself. I mean, it was very, because I was one of the organisers of Dance Camp East, so it was quite, we saw a lot of action, and the good bits were good, but the tricky bits were very tricky.
Well, it depends, on how you work it, but yes. Yes.
You put
I had a bit of a gift for things like that.
Yes.
And I chose people as the core team who were also good at that kind of thing. So we always got through.
But with any core team, don't you then also realise, oh God, this is what politics is about? People forming gangs, people being voted out, people getting upset. There wasn't a harm.
That's to do with how you set it up.
But we tried our best, but there was always a little bit of friction that not everybody can be on the same wavelength. But then you said you got chucked out, so obviously
eventually, yes.
But how did that happen then? Because
it's such a long story.
Yes,
well, these were the times of the Battle of the Beanfield and stuff.
Oh yes,
and there was all sorts going on, and all sorts of people thought, "Oh, I could do that. That's easy."
Yes,
really understand that it isn't.
It's not. No, but I mean, people think, it would be lovely. I would love to be part of that. And then they realise, actually, there's a lot more social skills and sort of looking at the big picture. Because when I spoke to people who did the Barsham fairs in East Anglia, there was a small core team, but then they found all these other people wanting to get involved. And that's when the core team went, we're going to just leave it now, because it's not what we set it up to be, and they don't quite understand. They want the T-shirt saying on the core team, and the ego gets involved, and all sorts of, and power. Suddenly they become little.
Well, I had that full on. And it was Sid Rawle particularly who fronted.
Oh, Sid, yes,
and they wanted to take over the Oak Dragon. They said, "We are the Oak Dragon tribe. You're just a fascist dictator," that kind of stuff.
Brilliant.
And I said, "Over my dead fucking body. So who's going to come for me first?" And they backed off. So they split off and started the Rainbow Circle, taking about 1/3 of our people and 1/3 of our gear, and so that sort of started out. But then in the Oak Dragon as well, there were all sorts of machinations which I don't want to really go into. And so eventually I realized the best thing to do is for me to go.
Yes.
And so I left. And then in the 1990s, I was involved in other things, magical spiritual work with Bosnia and Kosovo. And then I started a new generation of camps called the 100th Monkey Camps, which were putting the camps to work spiritually. We were working with world events and doing meditation and group process work using the talking stick and all sorts of methods which had been developed in the alternative sector, psychotherapeutic methods and things like that. But we were making it into a world thing, not a personal growth thing. And so we were working with the Bosnia War, with South Africa, with French nuclear testing, with the ozone layer, with forest fires, Northern Ireland, all sorts of stuff. And each day we would take one of them and we'd process it through. Sometimes it was amazing, and amazing things happened. Again, there's so much to say, but for example, in 1995, we worked on Bosnia, and it was a really humdinger of a session. It was 7 or 8 hours long. People didn't want to break the circle. And this was about 100 people in the circle working with this. And people didn't want to break the circle. It was so electric. But anyway, we came out of it. Amazing, blimey. And then someone heard on the radio and the news the next day that while we had been in session, a bunch of drunken Serbs had bombed a marketplace in Sarajevo, killing 60 people. And that was very, very stirring, because we realized, shit, you've got to accept the synchronicity issue, but also this went wrong. We were seeking resolution and peace, but what happened was that 60 people died in this marketplace. But the camp ends eventually. We all go home. Within 9 days, NATO went in. The war was over.
Right.
Because that one event was the tipping point. And that made me aware of what happens when you're doing process work. You can affect the collective unconscious, and you can actually, at times, when the conditions are right, and if you really work at it, you can affect public consensus, and you can tilt things so that things change.
Yes.
We had a few instances of that during that work.
That must have taken a lot out of you.
Yes.
Feeling like you're holding this space and this kind of responsibility.
But I've been a very driven person, you see, throughout life. And once I get a bee in my bonnet about something, I've just got to do it. That's I mean, it's the same now. I've got this blood cancer, and when I went in for diagnosis and stuff, they said, "Whoa, if you're lucky, you've got a year to live." And here I am.
6 years
and
later.
I've really raised some eyebrows amongst the doctors. And my specialist in the hospital here, she said to me, "Well, Mr. Jenkins, I don't know what you're doing, and I don't want to know, but whatever you're doing, just carry on."
Yes, but that's quite an interesting parallel universe, isn't it? Doctors, appointments, scans, tests.
And you see, this is the same stuff. And people, you see, I've also been very involved with things like Earth Mysteries, and I've done a whole lot of work on this area and on energy fields in stone circles and all sorts of things like that. And I've also been involved with ET stuff. Particularly with a group of beings called the Council of Nine, for whom I wrote a book in, 30 years ago. in the 1990s. And then I've been involved with crop formations, Glastonbury stuff, astrology. I've been a pretty well-known astrologer. And people kind of think, well, how does that relate to stuff working in Palestine? And the answer to me is it's about consciousness. And it's also about reaching over beyond our comfort zone and going over to connect with the other side.
Yes.
Whether it's between Israelis and Palestinians, or whether it's between crop circle researchers and what they call the circle makers, or whether it's between humans and ETs. It's this crossing the boundary thing. And there's an element of diplomacy as well. I guess in some ways I'd call myself a bit of a citizen diplomat, Yes, I do know, I have known people in Hamas, for example. Most of them are dead now, unfortunately. And, I have been involved in stuff. I have met, been involved with some pretty wacky Israeli settlers. I've been involved in setting up secret warning systems between ex-IDF soldiers who feel bad about what they were doing in the West Bank, a warning system whereby the Palestinians could be warned of activities that the settlers might get into, disruptive activities, all this kind of stuff, and it's the same thing for me. It's about crossing the Great Divide. It's about going into levels, for example, I get annoyed, unfortunately, with a lot of the Palestine activists at the moment, because it's all very well bellyaching about genocide and protesting and going on demonstrations and everything, but I'm encouraging people, look, get involved with a Palestinian, right? One friend. You can't solve the Gaza problem. You're just one person. But get close to one friend online. Form a funding community of 10 people who are all prepared to put in 20 quid a month in order to support this person. Stay with this person for years.
Yeah.
Create that contact between you and between them, and it's it becomes an emotional contact, And I'm saying to people, do this, but people are afraid. They're afraid to step outside their comfort zone. It's one of the big lurgies of countries like Britain and Europe and America, the rich world. It's one of the lurgies we have, is that we're stuck inside this affluent pot, this secure pot, where we just don't know what it's like being in the majority of humanity, which is what people call the global south.
Yes.
Which is 80% of the world's population. And the thing is, the future is theirs, not ours. The past is ours.
Right.
The future is theirs. And this is what the meaning is. And so things like, say, the crisis in Gaza, that is, in my estimation, in my metaphysical way of seeing things, the Gazans have, on behalf of humanity, have been making a blood sacrifice. And the blood sacrifice, and this is about humans against the mega machine. And this is about the big dilemma that we face today. And this is about the transformation of our planet. Because we've got to deal with the wars, the devastation, and all of the other stuff which we know we've got to deal with, ecological, climatic, social, psychological, everything. We've got to deal with this stuff, and this is the same stuff. And in a sense, the Gazans have been making a kind of a blood sacrifice for humanity to get us to get clear about things that we need to get clear about. And one of the key ones is the matter of war. And for example, we live in a country, Britain, which has a major investment in this whole thing. We have been responsible for all sorts of stuff, you know. And one of the reasons I got involved with Palestine actually was to do some work, the little bit that I can do, towards redeeming some of the shadow of the British Empire.
Well, yes, absolutely. But then, you know, I did notice this week America just renamed one of their departments to call it, rather than Department of whatever
Defense.
defense, they've called it Department of War. So,
Yes.
and they're getting quite excited, aren't they? They're getting very
Yes.
this thing with war attack. You
Well,
know,
this is about the male testosterone idea that you can do these things and there will be no consequences for you. You know, it's this impunity thing. You know, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for Israelis at the moment for the way they have totally screwed up their lives. You know, they've not only screwed up the lives of Palestinians, they've screwed up the whole Israeli project. They've allowed a false perception of the Jewish faith and truth to get. They've allowed it all to get twisted into Zionism when there's something so amazing for the Jewish people themselves, you know. And I know so many good people in Israel who at the moment are really suffering from moral damage, you know, from what they've been a part of. And similarly, you know, I'm closer really to Palestinians in the West Bank, and I'm involved with a school called the Hope Flowers School, which is a world leader in war trauma work and social reconstruction work, and that's another story.
Well, yes. So just going back, you mentioned the ET and the Council of Nine. When did you become involved? Was that something you set up, or you became kind of involved in it?
Well, no. What happened was I was working in the book in the book industry as an editor in the 1990s.
Right. Which publisher was that?
Huh?
What was the publisher?
Gateway Books.
Gateway. Oh yes. Gateway.
Yeah. You'll remember them. They published a good lot of books, very good books, and a lot of them were edited by me.
Yes.
And anyway, I was at work one day, and phone comes in, and the publisher says, "Would you?" You know, he gave me a funny look, and he said, "Do you fancy editing a book about ET channeling then?" And I thought, "Oh no, you know, like not another one." So I said no. And then I just got this strong sort of signal on the top of my head, bing, 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 bing. And so I said to him, "When you finish talking, put him on." And I clicked immediately with this chap. He was a chap called Sir John Whitmore. And anyway, I landed up compiling a book out of the records from 20 years of channeling. And this was with quite a high-powered group of people who were all involved in government, or there were former Olympic sports people. There were people like Gene Roddenberry and people like I'm sorry.
Yes, I can't. I was just kind of remembering a few of the titles they had on that, but I can't remember. I don't know. There was a book. I don't know. It's slightly different, isn't it? The New View over Atlantis as well, but that's Earth Mysteries.
Well, that's John Michel. That's more to do with Earth Mysteries stuff.
Yes, but the Gate. So, what was your publication called?
The Only Planet of Choice.
Oh, okay, Only Planet of Choice. And so was that edited by a lot of different people?
No, it was me.
Right, got you.
I was given thousands of pages of transcripts of channeling sessions over 20 to 25 years, and I had to reduce it to a 450-page book. And that's what I did.
Right, I can.
And it was an amazing process. It was a life changer for me. So you ask, how did I get involved? Again, a long story, but when I was being interviewed for that job, I eventually was interviewed by the Council of Nine themselves, and I asked them, like, are you sure I'm the right person to do this for you? And they just said to me, well, you are one of us, and you need no preparation. And
Right.
that, for me, at the time, it knocked me off my seat, actually, because I'd been going through a shit time before that, and suddenly here was some cosmic beings saying, changing the whole level of everything. So I feel that on a soul level, basically, I've been involved with them over many lives, and this is the involvement in this life, and everything I've been doing since then, which is 1993, including my involvement with Israel and Palestine, and with other things, and with us mystery stuff, and now I'm kind of serving as something of an elder in this community down here in Cornwall as well.
Yes. So
And
the
so
only
I
planet.
very much feel the hidden hand of the Council of Nine behind me all the time on these things.
So the author was Phyllis, wasn't it?
Yes, Phyllis
Right.
Schlemmer.
And is that, and was there, I know this is, I'm just curious, were they actually 9 people on that particular group? Was that
No.
No. How did,
It was a group of humans, and Phyllis was the channel, or the transceiver, we called it, and the Council of Nine are, for want of a better term, kind of part of the management structure of the universe.
right. And they would be extraterrestrial beings that you were channeling through.
Not in bodies.
But in spirit.
Yes.
Right. Got you now. Yeah, no, it's because I went to, there was the place called, it was the Sound Bath, which was the integration system. It was in the Joshua Tree area, and all the people there were also sort of dealing with a very similar world of, ETs basically, and yes, and were telling us, how they would sort of in the evening would sort of disappear into the cosmos and come back. So yeah, it was quite interesting. So is that work that I might have missed that? Is that something that you're still very much involved with this particular group?
Not with the group. Most of them are dead now.
No, there you go. And is that work still happening?
Well, yes.
It's still there, and it's still
yes. Well, the Nine are very much involved with planet Earth. It's a very long story, that, but
yeah. Well, it sounds. No, it's and does that have any connections? Because I remember, I don't know if you've ever met him, a guy called Marek, and I remember we were down in Suffolk, with a guy who called himself Music Martin, and there was an American Air Force base, wasn't there? And there was a sort of a UFO landing. Is that anything connected with the same project that you were part of, or is that a different project?
Not really, no.
No. Okay, then. So what was the kind of the general message, or the general sort of idea behind this? What is it that people are trying to achieve?
Well, the Nine were basically more or less saying, you humans are not only fucking up your own planet, you're fucking up the universe. Get your acts together. If you want me to do it in one-liner, that's it.
that was a concise way. But were they
basically,
able?
it was at much greater length, and they explained the whole reason why.
And how important is Earth in the whole structure of the universe?
More important than we think.
Right.
Because Earth is a unique planet with a high level of physicality, and it's a place where a new level of physical involvement by spirit souls is being developed. And the problem is that it has gone rather wrong, because humanity has forgotten the reason why it came, and keeps recycling, reincarnating. And we are, of course, as you know, on the potentially can destroy ourselves. And this is very unusual in the universe. And what's important here is that planet Earth is a school. It's a place where souls come to learn about being in dense physicality and balancing the spiritual and the physical. And the issue, and what ought to be happening, is that we ought to be graduating from this. We ought to be learning the lessons, graduating from it, and going back, or going back to our old places, or going forward to other things in the universe. And the thing is, we've bottlenecked this situation because people are not leaving our planet. They're just coming. And so we've got this population problem now. And we're also blocking up the through flow of you could say, the educational through flow of souls. And this is creating something of a crisis
in the universe.
In the universe.
Right. When did it become much more of an issue than it is now? Did this start in the Industrial Revolution, or was it before?
No, it goes right back, actually. It goes right back.
Does it go back to the time of the O years, so to speak, the birth of Christ? Was that?
Oh, it goes back beyond that.
Right. The BC years.
It's to do with the loss of spirituality, you could say. And I think one of the key points was in the thousands BC, when many of the very ancient civilizations fell.
Right.
And in Britain, that was around 1200 BCE, at the end of the megalithic period. When, in a sense, a spell was broken. A magic spell that was around the earth was broken around that time. And this was, in a sense, a global phenomenon. And it concerned a loss of spirit and a loss of... we lost our way as a planetary race.
But it must have been a very... But it must have been quite a small what was the population like did you say 1200 BC or?
Yes.
Right.
But the population of the world?
Yes.
It was probably 200 million or something like that.
Right. But what was the spell that got broken, though? Was it a global spell? It couldn't have been just one area.
In a way, yes, it was the magical relationship. It was our magical relationship with the land and with the planet, and our inherent spirituality within us. We started instead creating religions,
right,
rather than living in spirit, so to speak. And that's what people in modern times, people who are on either a spiritual or a growth path, that's what people are striving to regenerate now.
Yes. But do you often find that people not sure how one goes about that? I mean, there's one thing saying...
Oh, yes.
But
for sure.
But that's often a tricky one, isn't it? Because one can end up being slightly misguided or,
That's true, but we have to remember that it's actually more difficult avoiding the issue than tackling it. The consequences of avoiding it are greater. This comes up particularly when you come towards your death, because it's truth time. What the fuck have you been doing with your life?
Yes.
This is the question. What are you here for? In what way are you contributing towards the betterment of humanity? these questions matter. It doesn't matter how much money you earned or what kind of status you came. It's what good have you been doing for humanity in your own sphere? You know, and those are the key issues that come up, really. In that sense, I've been facing near death quite a lot in the last few years with my cancer, and I am glad to say that all the crazy things I've been doing, on the whole, I'm quite glad about. I did that, even though it's been bloody hard, and I haven't made money, and and I didn't get the job, I didn't get the grant, but I kept on going, and I'm very happy about that.
Yes,
I'm happy
absolutely.
about the lives I've saved. I'm happy about the way I've contributed to people's growth paths throughout life, as an astrologer and running the camps and, you know, working in Glastonbury and all the stuff and working with people out in the Middle East. And I'm happy about that, really.
Yes. So just going slightly back, not to the BC years, but when you obviously you must have been such a sort of figure and a sort of a person of the Glastonbury scene. What was the reason for sort of leaving that? Because you ran the Isle of Avalon, didn't you, website for
Yes.
Glastonbury? Incredibly successful. I mean, Glastonbury, was growing and it sort of becomes this kind of centre of
Yes.
cosmicness. There's the Tor, the Chalice Well, all sorts of legends around that period. Was that a big wrench to sort of move away from that?
Well, it was, yes, but I had been there for 28 years.
Yes.
And in the last few years, I realized I was no longer contributing anything to Glastonbury, and Glastonbury was no longer contributing to me, and I needed to make a change. I was approaching 60. I was also very involved in Palestine at the time, and I was realizing people in Glastonbury think they've got problems, but no, they do not
No.
in comparison to Palestinians. And I nearly actually went native and lived out there. And if it weren't for the fact that the Israelis control, control all that, I would have lived out there.
Yes. How did you end up in Cornwall? Was there any particular
By
reason?
chance,
Neil,
I left Glastonbury. I drove around for a few months, staying with people, looking for openings. And then my cousin rang me up and said, "Hey, we're going down to Cornwall on a holiday next week. Why don't you come down there?" So I went down there, stayed with some old friends, a chap called Hamish Miller, the dowser, and I stayed in a caravan in their garden, had the week with my cousin, and then at the end of the week, um, Hamish sort of asked me, "Well, what are you doing next then, Palden?" And I said, "To be honest, Hamish, I don't know." And he said, "Well, you can stay in that caravan until you do."
right. And there you go.
And then later on I found I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving, and various things happened, including a lovely encounter with dolphins at one stage. But various things happened to keep me here, and so I've been here for 15 years now.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm sure. And then
But
obviously,
Cornwall is also, if you're working with war zones and places like Palestine, and later on I got a bit involved in Syria. Those are high intensity situations, and you need to keep the work going. You need to have a good place to go back to. This is the same for all humanitarians, is you've got to have a safe, good place to go home to so that you can unravel and so that you don't accumulate too much PTSD and all this kind of stuff. And so Cornwall has been great for me in that regard, because by the end of those long years working with wars and conflicts, I was pretty beat up
well, yes.
by 2014-15, and stuff I witnessed in Syria in particular. I had a very, for me, as a humanitarian, very difficult things happened in Syria, and in a way, it marked the end.
Yes.
Marked the end. And I was 64, 65. And I didn't know it at the time, but within 5 years, I was going to have cancer anyway. So that was going to be my new battleground, in a sense, my new challenge.
What were your symptoms that you started to become aware of?
My back collapsed. It's a blood cancer, and it gets to your bones. It starts dissolving your bones, and the 4 bottom vertebrae of my back collapsed, and I was into utter pain. And within 2.5 months, it took 2.5 months to get a proper diagnosis, and suddenly, boof, I had cancer. I thought I had a really bad back problem, but now I had cancer, and so, and I was really at death's door as well.
Did you have to have stem cell treatment, or was it?
That was one option, but I chose not to take it.
Right.
I chose to go on a what they call a maintenance routine. You can't get rid of this particular kind of cancer. You don't get remission. You've got to maintain it. And so I've been on that one.
Right, my God, about 6 years. No, I know a few people who've had this. Suddenly one day, literally, we're looking absolutely fine. And then I've just heard, have you heard what's happened to Caroline? And it's like, no. And it's like, she had a bad back, thought it was just because she bent down to pick a dog up. And then it's like, she's full blown, this cancer, which is kind of stem cell treatment, being, put in a room.
Well, the one I have is called multiple myeloma. In my case, I think it was caused by radiation.
I think this is the same as hers, actually, from that title.
But there are people who are also affected by chemicals who get it. Yeah. It's definitely to do with toxicity rather than lifestyle.
Yes. God, that is horrendous. But you're thankful.
Well, I'm thankful that it happened when I was around the age of 70, because I had a pretty full life. And so I was able to think, okay, if I'm going to die, I have had a life. It would be terrible if I'd had it in my 40s.
Yeah.
When I was still working with kids, and life, it must be really difficult for younger people. So I was fortunate in a way to get it at my age. And what it's done is it's actually aged me more. So that in a way, behaviorally and in my thoughts and my physical capacities, I'm more like someone in his mid-80s, even though I'm in my mid-70s.
Right, yes, well.
And on a bad day, I feel like someone in his 90s,
But you've been doing a lot of your work and books and podcasts and bits and pieces, so you're still very active. Do you still have most of your work readily available?
Well, on my website, I've built an archive of everything that I can retrieve in the way of writings and all the stuff I've been doing. So it's on my website, which is palden.co.uk.
Oh, right. There's another.
Which is a website which is now 30 years old, would you believe? Because I started it in 1994.
God, that's old school, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is old school, yes.
And you've also got a blog as well, which is very...
Yes. Well, I started blogging after I got cancer, because it was a way of therapy, for me, partially, because I've been a writer all my life. But also it was a way of informing my friends what was going on, because one of the problems you get when you get cancer is people asking you 10 times a day, how are you? And I'm like, oh, fuck, like, leave me alone. Sometimes I just say, I'm like this, or I'm still alive or something, I mean, they sincerely do want to know, but it's being under such scrutiny is quite difficult, actually. And so I started blogging. And then I've been involved in radio and things. And so I started podcasting as well. So I've been in the last 6 years, I've been doing blogging and podcasting.
Well, yes, it's a good combination. It's a good combination. But yeah, I know. I sort of came across you, and I kind of thought I kind of remember hearing your name, and then this thing with my experience with the various camps and sort of alternative world, I suppose, if you want to call it such a thing, and then people like have I mentioned Jacob and Charlie and various other. I think Charlie lived with someone called Rosemary, I think, for a while, or Jacob did. Some Glastonbury accountant who, I don't know if she's still about. But anyway, it was that scene. I remember staying with both of them on that street in Glastonbury. And yes, Rainbow's End and all that kind of stuff. And the work of Pete Loveday, which was always... I don't know. He did a book called the Russell, the Saga of a Friendly Man or something, didn't he? I don't know if you remember Pete Loveday's work. But it was just an interesting time during the 80s and 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yes, but Cornwall, it's on the climate front. Is it quite tropical or quite wet, or what's the climate like?
It gets very wet and windy. But yes, it's one of the warmest parts of Britain.
Right.
And we get 1 or 2 nights of light frost a year. That's it. And so I'm right at the end. I'm right by 3 miles from Land's End, and I'm surrounded by sea in 3 directions.
Yes. Is that where
there's land only in one direction, which is eastwards?
Eastward, yes. Is that where the St Michael's ley line runs through? Right. So you are connected to us in East Anglia because it runs right through. And
yes.
Oh, Hamish did the book, didn't he? That particular book on the ley line.
I'm a major worker on that line too, down this end.
Yes.
Barnless Bowl is one of my favourite spots.
I know. Well, Graham Joyce, who was from this area, he did a walk a few years ago, walked the ley line and, copy, in the footsteps of, is it Hamish, isn't it, who was the guy who did the original book.
Yes.
So, amazing.
Well, he was the person who, in a way, vectored me down to Cornwall on a magical level, He was the guy whose caravan I stayed in.
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
That's nice.
And just in a week or two's time, I'm going to be doing a gig with his widow, Bar Miller, who is also, and so we're doing a sort of an elders gig together,
Brilliant. Where's that going to be?
Oh, it's in Penzance here, fully booked.
Fully booked, right. Is this the one that's just put on your Facebook page?
Yeah.
Right. God, that's fantastic. Yes, Pen. Yeah, celebrate and cherished elders. Right.
Yeah. There's a bit of a scene going on down here, It's very interesting. There are interesting people who live down here, really.
Well,
people who like to live at the end of the road, the end of the world,
Yes.
Because all the madness is in one direction, you see.
I know, and you've got to see. Yes. Did you ever get that book, The New View Over Atlantis?
Oh, yes. I was a personal friend of John Michel. And I very much, my work in Ancient Mysteries very much carries on from his work. I've opened up a new level, which he opened up the first level, and I've opened up the next level on the whole business of ley lines and everything. And so yes, John Michel I've been very involved with.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you ever so much for your time. This has been quite an extraordinary... And I have to say, the reception has been so much better than I could have dreamed of, actually. Yes. There's been no freezing, no sort of hesitation.
No, it worked well today.
Considering I'm in Norwich and you're in Cornwall.
Yes, that's amazing, isn't it? I was talking to my son just recently. He was in Montreal in Canada and talking to me on his phone, and it was like he was just down the road. So it's amazing what's happened, during our lifetimes, this kind of stuff.
Well, absolutely. Yes.
Because when I was young, ringing Canada was a major operation and very expensive.
I was going to say it was a slight, massive investment, and one you felt very like, are you okay? Fine, bye.
Yes.
Every minute was like, oh my God, that's cost me another 20p.
It's amazing what has changed during our lifetimes, Really.
Young people
when I was in university, I was on the 4th largest computer in the world at the time. It had a memory of 56K, right? Yes. And the idea that people should have pocket computers, which would have vast kind of capacities, what we now call a mobile phone, that was sort of science fiction, but it's reality.
Yes, I mean, what they had when they went to the moon in whenever, the 60s, it's such a primitive kind of computer system, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely, I
Yeah.
don't know.
And the computer I was on in 1971, it covered a whole basement. It was an enormous mainframe computer. And now, one of these little mobile phones will have thousands of times the capacity, or even millions of times the capacity of one of those. It's amazing what's happened in that time.
I know, it is quite extraordinary. And we take it like, oh my God, I can't get a reception. Oh no, it's fine. Or, oh my God, it's a bit slow. We forget just how extraordinary it's all going on. So, yes, that's what I say.
Anyway, nice to meet you.
Yes, well, thank you ever so much for your time. And
to all your listeners.
Yes, I will. Okay, well, take care and have a lovely evening. And I'll say goodbye.
And thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that's the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Palden Jenkins for giving me the time for that interview. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. So if you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. And in the meantime, all I have to say is have a great week. Stay safe.